Hey guys, so today I want to talk to you about PTSD, what it is, and some symptoms and some things like that. We had planned to go out and vlog, but I have some sort of a rash over about 60% of my body right now, which is why I'm showing up in a house coat with no makeup and my hair like this. So I figured showing up was better than not showing up at all, and I know I can teach you something today, so stick around. PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, and this can happen to anyone at any point in their life from witnessing a traumatic event or actually, of course, being part of a traumatic event. So you don't actually have to be part of it, you can just see it. It doesn't have to happen to you, and you can have PTSD from this. Really common effects of PTSD are gonna be having panic attacks, really high anxiety, of course, nightmares, flashbacks to do with that situation. And those are things that I feel like the majority of people with PTSD, we all experience those things, or at least a few of those things, right? Those are kind of like the hallmarks of PTSD. But there's a lot more things that can happen to you too. And that's kind of what I want to focus on today, because I feel like I have some of the symptoms that are not talked about a lot. I've done a few videos in the past over this, but the more and more I go on and live my life with PTSD and I have weird things pop up, I'm finding that they're all connected to the PTSD. I thought this might be helpful for y'all to hear about it. So one of the first things is trouble with concentrating. And this totally makes sense because, you know, obviously if your brain is in fight or flight mode, then you're not going to be able to concentrate as well. But I kind of didn't realize this was a thing that could linger, and it really can. So trouble concentrating can affect things like your work, of course, but also things in your personal life. Because if you just think about the things that you have to do day to day in your house, if you're having trouble focusing, concentrating, and staying on task, everything around you is going to suffer. So that is a big symptom of PTSD that I didn't even know could be a thing. And this can linger for, of course, any amount of time. For me, it does seem to come and go, but that is something I really struggle with. PTSD can cause you to have a limited life experience because of avoiding things. In one way, I think it's great to avoid your triggers because, of course, you don't want to be triggered, right? But this can also really limit your life if you feel like you can't go certain places, or if you feel like, you know, maybe you're afraid to go on the road, maybe you're afraid to go around people or in crowds or something. So it can be really limiting. Of course, this is going to depend on the person, and it's also going to depend on how far you can get in your therapy, because you can do certain types of therapy like exposure therapy. Do this with a trained professional, please, because this can go very wrong. So have someone guiding you through this. Don't just do it on your own, because from what I understand, exposure therapy can cause you to have setbacks if it's not done right. So be sure to actually talk to a professional about this and have them guide you through it. So of course, this can cause isolation if you're not getting out and if it's interrupting your daily life. So this can be a problem in itself because we need support as humans. So if you're not getting support and you're self-isolating because you're afraid of going out from your triggers, this can cause a whole other set of problems. PTSD can cause skin issues too. And this is something that I experienced, and I didn't know it was PTSD related for the longest time. But whenever you are under high stress, like PTSD stress all the time, then your body is releasing a higher level of cortisol, which can make you break out in hives, eczema. If you have psoriasis, it can make it worse. I'm not sure if it can cause psoriasis, but I know if you have it, it can make it a million times worse. So that's just something to keep in mind. And for me, whenever I have a very scary thing happen or something where I'm triggered, then I always break out in rashes. Pretty much immediately, within an hour of something bad happening, I will break out in rashes. And these rashes can range from the size of maybe a quarter and get bigger, all the way up to, like right now, it's over 60% of my body. And in my experience, these itch so bad. There's nothing you can do to make them go away. And it's just really weird, first off, that happens. But also, like, who would think that would be a PTSD thing, right? So that's a problem. Oh yeah, another thing that it can cause is sudden onset dyslexia. And this is something that I struggle with that I didn't know was PTSD related until recently. And I knew that I had started having problems with getting my B's, P's, and D's confused, and also my M's and N's, whenever I'm typing, and also whenever I'm writing, like handwriting. I will get those things completely confused and twisted. The sudden onset dyslexia thing to me is the most crazy because I didn't know that can happen to people, and I didn't know it was PTSD related until recently, which it kind of blew my mind. I mean, I'm glad I know, but like, wow, that's crazy. So of course that can also affect things like your ability to work, because if you are getting your letters confused whenever you're typing or writing, then that's gonna mess you up at work. So I didn't know that was a possibility. And for me, it's not all the time. For me, it's whenever I start to get tired, then that happens to me now, and it didn't happen to me before I had PTSD. From what I understand, that is typically how it's affecting people. I've done a bit of research this week, and from what I understand, it typically is gonna be if you're under high stress. So PTSD can also cause gastrointestinal problems, which is crazy. So this can be IBS, of course, stomach pains, diarrhea, trouble digesting your food, all kinds of things that are PTSD related, which I didn't know about, and I don't feel like that's talked about either. And you would think that the upset stomach stuff would be a very common talked about thing. And I don't know if it's because people aren't linking it, but I know that people suffer from that who also have PTSD, so it seems like that should be talked about more. PTSD can cause cardiovascular problems as well. So this could lead to heart problems over time, but typically what this is gonna be is increased heart rate and maybe hypertension. And it can, of course, over time cause you to have heart problems that are more severe. So chronic stress from PTSD can cause your immune system to weaken as well. So this is gonna make you more susceptible to illnesses and other things that are out there. So it's really important that whenever you do have PTSD, that you are taking care of yourself and making sure you're up on all your vitamins and minerals and things, because that's kind of gonna have to be your upped immune system, because your immune system can be compromised. And by the way, this is stuff that can happen. This doesn't mean it's going to, and just because you do have part of this doesn't mean that it's gonna be the full blown all of it. So, you know, maybe you're high stress all the time. It might not affect your immune system to the point where you're immune compromised, but it could. So that's why I'm talking about it, because these are things that I feel like are important to talk about, because they could potentially help you to identify what's going on. And, you know, maybe it's not all these other things. Maybe it is just PTSD, and all these other things are symptoms of that. So maybe, you know, treating the PTSD is really treating the underlying source, which is going to make the other things go away on their own or lessen on their own and be easier to manage. So of course, this can cause you to have depression, more anxiety than you would, I guess, normally. And unfortunately, it can also cause you to have substance abuse problems, because you're trying to cope and just make it day to day. So a lot of people turn to drugs or alcohol for that, and it can spiral out of control really, really quickly. So let's talk about how service dogs can help with PTSD really quickly. So one of the tasks that I think everyone can benefit from is deep pressure therapy. And I did a video on this not too long ago, so I'll link it for y'all. But basically what it does is it helps to regulate your nervous system, so it takes you out of that fight or flight mode and puts you back into basically a state where you can think clearly. And that is a big, big task for service dogs, for people with PTSD, and it just is. And some people want to argue that that's not a task, but as somebody who struggles and needs that task, I can tell you it very much is a valid task. You're not just snuggling with your dog, and I know it looks that way, but that's not what it is. And the best way to do deep pressure therapy, by the way, is gonna be to have them lay on your center of your body. Obviously, depending on how big they are, they might be too big for this to be appropriate, but that is what's gonna help regulate your nervous system. So you need the pressure on the center of your center mass, right? So this can come in form of them laying on you and putting pressure on you there, or depending on how big your dog is, maybe just hugging them really tight and having them lean against you in that way. That can be very helpful. And that's what Farabee does. Farabee actually puts all her weight against me whenever we're sitting up, and then I hug her, and it helps me to calm down really pretty quickly. Obviously, if we're in a place where I can lay down and have her do it, it helps so much more and so much faster. I just realized I haven't mentioned something. So I made a PTSD service dog task training book. So I'll link that for y'all, but it has the 8 most common tasks that you can use for PTSD and how to actually train them step by step. So I'll link that for y'all, because I think that's something that's super helpful for for y'all. That's why I made it. Of course, they can do things like watch your back. Therapy does this for me every time we go somewhere, and it makes me feel so comfortable because I know that she watches everyone. If somebody's behind us, she watches them. And I can tell by her body language if they're getting closer, or, you know, or even if there is somebody, just from the way that her body language changes, I can tell there's somebody in the vicinity, right? And then as they get closer, then her body language changes, and I can tell, like, oh wait, you know, there's somebody actually approaching. Which, to me, just knowing that she knows if somebody even walks on the same aisle as us, or like in our viewing area and I'm not expecting it, it helps me a lot to know that she's gonna have a body language reaction to that I can see really easy when my back is turned. So I think that's a huge help. Like I said, Watch My Six is a huge one for us in deep pressure therapy. Those are the ones that I personally find the most comfort in for my PTSD. So, and I feel like the majority of people who have PTSD use those tasks, like, because that kind of covers it all, right? The startle response that you're gonna have, because they're gonna watch and make sure for you. And then of course the other thing with helping you come down from a PTSD panic attack. And by the way, this next part isn't really a task, but I do think it's super important to mention. Whenever you have PTSD, a lot of times you're isolated, or maybe you isolate yourself on accident. Maybe you don't want to go out as much, and maybe you don't really want to participate in things like you used to. Service Dog can provide you with just that support of having somebody with you. And that to me is huge because I don't feel alone. If I didn't have therapy, I would be alone and I would feel very alone. So it can be a great thing to feel like you have somebody to go somewhere with. And I know for me, I don't like to go anywhere with people necessarily, because if I go somewhere with people, then if I feel like I need to leave, then I have to explain the whole thing, right? And so I feel like whenever I go places with therapy, number one, it's just me and her and we can come and go as we please, but I don't feel alone because she's with me. The other thing, you can use your service dog as an excuse if you need to leave a situation. You can say, oh, it's time for them to eat, or I can tell that they need to go to the bathroom, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of use them as a scapegoat to get out of a situation, which sounds horrible. But if you have PTSD and you have pushy friends, then this really can be helpful for you. I'm gonna link my PTSD task training book for you guys. And I think I mentioned something else. Oh, the deep pressure therapy tutorial that I made and like how it works and why it works. I'll link both of those things below for you. I think that's it for today. Honestly, y'all, my mind is so scattered and boggled because my whole body is just itching. Like I said, whenever we first started, I have a rash on at least 60% of my body right now. So it's incredibly distracting and itchy, and y'all know I don't show up looking like this normally, so just look over me. I hope this was super helpful for y'all. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next week. Bye.